Can you hurry it up? We don't want that kind sitting here all day." The waiter sneered, dropping the menu onto the table with a careless slap. His voice was loud enough to ripple through the quiet restaurant, drawing a few uncomfortable glances, but no immediate protests. The boy, 9 years old, thin, dressed in his Sunday best, with a shirt his mother had pressed until it shone, looked down at his lap. His small fingers clenched the napkin until his knuckles whitened. He had been so excited to come here. His mother had saved for 3 weeks, cutting corners where she could, just so her son could taste what she called a little dream on a plate. A birthday treat, something rare, something special. But already the magic was gone. The waiter leaned in, his smirk widening. "I'll tell you right now, we don't serve kids like you steak. Better stick to fries and soda. That's probably what you're used to." The boy's lip trembled, but he didn't speak. His mother sat frozen across from him, torn between fury and helplessness. She had dealt with looks before, whispers, the subtle ways the world tried to remind her and her child where they stood. But this wasn't a whisper, it was a slap in public. A couple at the next table shifted uneasily. One man muttered under his breath, "That's not right," but then buried his face in his phone, unwilling to do more. The child blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. He didn't want to cry here, not here. He wanted to be strong, like his mom told him he was. But the words stung like acid, that kind. He wanted to disappear. And then a chair scraped. The sound cut through the silence like a gavel striking wood. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed against the polished floor, and a presence loomed. The boy lifted his head slowly. Standing behind him was a tall man in a dark suit, his silver hair combed neatly back, his expression carved in stone. His voice, when it came, was deep and measured, each syllable weighted with authority. "That's enough." The waiter froze, his smirk faltering. "Excuse me, sir, but—" "I said enough." The man's words landed like a verdict. "I will not stand by while a child, any child, is demeaned under my watch." The room fell silent. Forks hovered mid-air, conversations died, and every eye shifted to the man in the suit. The mother's lips parted in shock. She recognized him instantly. Judge Harold Bennett. The Judge Bennett, a name spoken with both respect and fear across the city. A man known for fairness, but also for an iron spine no one dared test twice. He turned his gaze on the boy, and for a moment the sternness melted into something softer. "Son," he said, voice gentler now, "don't you ever mistake cruelty for truth. You belong here. You belong anywhere your dignity carries you." The boy swallowed hard, staring up at him. His throat ached, but he nodded. Then Bennett pivoted back to the waiter, whose face had gone pale. "What is your name?" Stephen, sir. Stephen Harper." "Well, Stephen Harper," Bennett said, his tone razor-sharp, "you have not only insulted a child, but you have humiliated his family in front of witnesses. You have tarnished the reputation of this establishment, and you have spat on the very principles this country claims to stand for. I do not tolerate such things in my courtroom. And let me remind you, young man, I see this restaurant as no different right now. You're on trial. Your words, your crime, your actions, your evidence." The waiter stammered. I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said, and it will be remembered." Murmurs spread across the restaurant. Phones discreetly lifted, recording the moment. The owner rushed from the back, his face already flushed with panic. "Judge Bennett, please," the man pleaded. "This is all a misunderstanding. Stephen here is new. He doesn't represent us." "This is not a misunderstanding," Bennett thundered, his voice rising for all to hear. This is systemic poison, and it thrives because men like you call it an incident instead of a crime against decency. That child deserves respect, not apologies after humiliation. Respect the moment he sits down.
The boy's mother felt a rush of something she hadn't felt in years: vindication. She squeezed her son's hand, tears pooling in her eyes. Not tears of pain, but of pride. Someone had stood for him. The judge turned, his eyes sweeping across the diners. How many of you would have spoken if I had not stood? How many of you would have let this child walk out, believing he is less than you simply because of the color of his skin? Silence is complicity. You all know it.
The weight of his words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Shame flickered across faces. A few bowed their heads. The waiter's bravado was gone. He looked like a man awaiting sentencing. Bennett leaned closer to him. You will apologize. Not a muttered word, not a half-hearted excuse. You will apologize with the full weight of your regret, or you will never serve in this city again. I'll see to it personally. Stephen's lips trembled. He turned to the boy, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I was wrong. You deserve better. The boy didn't speak. He simply looked at him with eyes too wise for his age, and then turned back to the judge. Bennett placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Justice isn't just handed down in courtrooms. Sometimes it must be demanded in places like this, where hate thinks it can hide. The owner stumbled over promises, free meals, suspension, retraining, but Bennett silenced him with a glance. Your money cannot erase humiliation. Only change can. Then, as if sealing the matter, Bennett motioned to the waiter. Leave, now! Stephen obeyed, slinking away like a shadow. Then the judge pulled out a chair and sat beside the boy. What's your name, son? Marcus, the boy whispered. Well, Marcus, the judge said with a small smile, I happen to know this place has one of the finest steaks in the city, and tonight you'll eat it. Not because you need to prove anything, but because you deserve it. The boy's mother finally let out a shaky laugh, relief breaking through. For the first time that night, Marcus's shoulders lifted, his eyes brightening. The restaurant buzzed with whispers, but no one dared to disrupt the new atmosphere. Judge Bennett had turned the humiliation into a trial, and the verdict was justice, for all to see. But Marcus didn't know then that this was only the beginning, because word of what happened would not stay within those four walls. Phones had captured it, stories would spread, and in the days that followed, justice would echo louder than anyone expected. The waiter thought his words would fade with the night. He had no idea that Judge Bennett would make sure the world remembered, and that Marcus would never forget the day a powerful voice silenced hate, not just for him, but for many.
The video went viral overnight. By morning, Marcus's face, wide-eyed and trembling in that restaurant, was everywhere. The clip captured the waiter's sneer, Judge Bennett's thunderous rebuke, and the apology dragged from trembling lips. Millions watched, millions shared, and millions weighed in. Hashtags burned across social media. Hashtag Justice for Marcus. Hashtag Voices Against Hate. Hashtag Judge Bennett. Comment sections lit up with outrage and support. Parents wrote about their children. Survivors of prejudice shared their scars. The story became bigger than one boy, one restaurant. It was about every moment people had swallowed their dignity just to get through a meal, a store, a life. Marcus didn't fully understand the wave he had set in motion. To him, it was still just about the hurt of that night. and the strange warmth of a stranger's hand on his shoulder telling him he belonged. But his mother knew. She saw the way reporters gathered outside her apartment. She saw the way neighbors she barely spoke to came by with flowers, with hugs, with promises that things will change now. Judge Bennett, however, understood better than anyone. He knew words alone rarely change the world. They needed consequences. They needed structure. And above all, they needed a reckoning. 3 days later, a formal hearing was announced, not for Stephen Harper, the waiter, alone, but for the restaurant itself. Complaints had surfaced. Other customers came forward with their own experiences of quiet discrimination, refusals of service, cold shoulders, subtle price hikes on certain patrons. A pattern painted itself across testimonies, and it was damning. Bennett didn't preside over the case. He couldn't, not after his public involvement. But his voice still thundered through it. He submitted a formal statement to the city's Human Rights Commission, one so sharp it left no room for soft excuses. The disease of hate thrives in silence. We are past the point of silence.
The commission took swift action. The restaurant faced fines, retraining mandates, and, perhaps worst of all, the owner himself was forced to issue a public apology. Cameras rolled as he stood before the city, his face pale, admitting his failures. "We failed Marcus," he said. "We failed his mother. And we failed every person who has walked through our doors expecting dignity but leaving with shame. We will change, or we will not exist."
But Judge Bennett was not done. He knew justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation. He reached out to Marcus's mother personally, inviting her and her son to speak at a community forum. At first, she hesitated. "I don't want him in the spotlight," she whispered over the phone. "He's just a boy." Bennett's reply was soft but firm. "He's more than that. He's a symbol now, not because he asked to be, but because the world chose to see him. And when the world is watching, silence becomes its own injustice." So Marcus stood, small but unshaken, at a podium in a crowded hall days later. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and with a trembling voice, he said the words that would be replayed for weeks. "I just wanted to eat steak. I didn't want to feel like I didn't belong. Nobody should feel like they don't belong." The simplicity cut deeper than any polished speech could. His innocence, unvarnished and raw, was an indictment stronger than law. People wept openly. The applause shook the walls. And Stephen Harper, the waiter, watched it all on a cracked phone screen from the shadows of his tiny apartment. His name had become synonymous with hate. He had been fired, blacklisted, cursed on the street. His friends turned cold. His family avoided calls. He had thought it was just one comment, one shift, one boy, but now it had consumed his life. Anger gnawed at him first. He wanted to blame the judge, the cameras, the overreaction. But deep down, he knew. He saw it in Marcus's eyes that night, the sting he'd caused, the shame he'd poured onto a child. That truth ate at him until rage soured into regret. Meanwhile, Judge Bennett's reach extended further. He launched an initiative, the Marcus Project, designed to educate restaurant staff across the city on dignity, equality, and implicit bias. It wasn't a seminar to be checked off a list. It was mandatory, rigorous, and personal. Workers sat face to face with families who shared their pain. They heard the voices of children like Marcus who had lived through casual cruelty. Some walked out shaken, others transformed. Marcus's mother stood beside the judge at the program's unveiling.
She never thought her son's tears would spark a movement, yet here they were, his name etched into flyers, his face lighting up billboards that read, "Respect is not optional." But the true revenge came quietly, almost poetically. Weeks later, Marcus and his mother returned to the same restaurant, not because they wanted to, but because Judge Bennett insisted. "You must face the place that tried to diminish you," he told Marcus, "and see that it has no power anymore." The doors opened, and every head turned. The manager himself rushed forward, trembling with nerves. The staff stood straighter, their eyes filled with something Marcus hadn't seen before: respect. This time, there was no sneer, no muttered insult. The table was set with care, the menus placed gently, the waiter's tone warm. Marcus ordered his steak, and when it arrived, sizzling and rich, the entire restaurant erupted into applause. Tears streamed down his mother's cheeks. Marcus blinked in astonishment, and Judge Bennett, seated across the room but watching closely, allowed himself the faintest of smiles. Justice, after all, wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about rewriting the ending. The story lived on, told in classrooms, in churches, in homes. Teachers used Marcus's words as lessons. Parents reminded their children of the judge who stood when no one else would. And the waiter who once tried to humiliate a boy became a cautionary tale whispered in kitchens. One cruel word can undo your life. One voice of justice can change the world. Marcus carried that night with him, not as a scar, but as a torch. He grew year after year into a young man who believed he had a place anywhere his dignity carried him, just as the judge had said. And whenever the world tried to dim his light, he remembered the sound of a chair scraping, footsteps crossing the floor, and a voice that silenced hate. In the end, it wasn't just the boy's dinner that was saved. It was a reminder to an entire city, an entire country, that silence is complicity, but courage is contagious. And revenge, the sweetest kind, is not destruction, but transformation. For Stephen Harper, the world had no patience left. For Marcus, the world opened wide. And for Judge Bennett, justice had once again spoken, not from the bench, but from the heart of a restaurant where hate thought it could whisper unnoticed. But the judge's voice was louder. It always would be.